Hello and welcome to another edition of The Journey. Well, we've decided to do a market update, and Jared and myself do it together so that you're hearing from both of us and just kind of have some conversation that we've been having in the office and just video it and make sure that you're part of that conversation. Remember, if you find this valuable or if you know somebody that might be interested in learning more about how we work, certainly share this with them or subscribe to our YouTube channel. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the markets, and we've been having a lot of questions coming from our clients and other people in the community about the markets and what our thoughts are on the markets. As far as the markets go, certainly we've seen some volatility there, and I would say that volatility is pretty typical, especially when a political presidential election happened and the incumbent did not win. So, which is exactly the situation we're in. And if we look back to presidential elections since 1936, when the incumbent is not in office and we have a new president in office, typically the first 6 months of that presidential term are a little bit more volatile than when the incumbent is in office. So I wouldn't say, I mean, we hear people say this time it's different, but in that aspect of it, it's not. And we're not going to get into political party, we're not going to get into who's doing what, but as a general, in the markets, we see volatility in those first 6 months of a new president. And obviously we've seen a pullback. And since February, we've seen the markets pull back a little bit, but that's not uncommon either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like he said, since the peak on February 19th, we've seen a 10% pullback in the S&P and about a 15% pullback, peak to trough in the Nasdaq as well. Over the last 70 years, there's been about 55 10% downturns in the S&P, which we would call a correction in the market. So it's not uncommon. It happens about every 18 months. And again, we've seen that so far this year, something we haven't seen over the last 2 years in the markets.
Yeah, and like Jared's alluding to, that's not uncommon either. The peak was in mid to late February. We were down in the S&P about 10. We've come back a little bit. We've kind of settled into I call it a trading range. We've seen a pretty flat and stable market, which from our perspective is a good sign. After volatility, that stability and that volatility going down a little bit and having some days where you'd call it flat, up or down a little bit, less than 0.5%. I think that certainly shows that maybe the markets are seeing, getting some footing there and, maybe pressing pause in a wait and see aspect of it. The other thing that we're looking at obviously is just what's driven the market the last 2 years has been, those magnificent seven, the tech type stocks, your Facebooks and your Googles and those type of things. And those have actually come back to the pack a little bit more than your traditional S&P type investments, and those have actually performed okay. So those stocks that have risen quickly over the last couple of years have kind of come back to the pack, and the pack is kind of catching up too. So another reason why diversification is important that we've seen.
Yeah, and our philosophy is we don't look at a specific day, a week, a month in the market. We're looking long term. We look at 3 to 5 years to 10 years, and the likelihood of seeing a positive return in a 3-year time frame is close to 88%. If you push that out to a 5-year time frame, again, that number goes to about 93% of the time you see a positive market over a 5-year rolling period.
Which really kind of leads us into those conversations we have with many of you, is trying to match your money to when your goals are. And for many of you who are needing that money in the next 2 to 5 years, we've started to pull back the risk in your portfolio because those goals are important regardless of who's in office, regardless of what geopolitical event is going on, regardless of what natural disaster we see. Those things are important to you. So stepping back and looking at your personal goals instead of the world view is important from our perspective. But to Jared's point, that 5-year period where we see returns positive 93% of the time, If we have time in the market for that money to come back, even if we've seen a 10% pullback, typically we're going to keep pace with inflation with that money. And that money that you'll need in the next 5 years, we've not seen a 10% pullback on, right? So, again, matching your money to your goals, making sure that we're looking at your personal situation. And those are the times to make changes. You don't want to make changes based on who's in office, what's happening, where and what, because we can't predict that. What we can predict most of the time is when you're going to retire, when your kids are going to go to college, when you might buy a house or a second home or whatever that might be. And if those things change based on your health, something happening within your family, you lose somebody, or they take a different job or whatever that might be, that's when we want to change and pivot on your goals. So keep that in mind. If you do have questions, we're here to talk. We have these conversations every day. If you're concerned about it, let's have that conversation. If you found this video interesting and valuable, pass it on to somebody else that's having anxiety about what's going on right now. And have a great month.